So, Kate, thank you for speaking to me.
Thanks for having me, Max.
You're my first victim.
Oh my gosh, I'm nervous.
I say victim, but...
Brought me into a little box room as well.
I know. So... Well, it's good sound quality.
No, it's good.
Just tell us about your story first of all, because people will know you from, you're very well known as a conservative thinker. Can I describe it as that? And researcher here in the UK. And you're an American voice as well, so you often get brought into US political stories. But how did you end up here in London, and what's your story?
I studied at the University of St Andrews for 4 years. I came over to Scotland when I was 18, really fell in love with Scotland, fell in love with the UK. Went back home when I graduated for a brief bit and then ended up at the Adam Smith Institute, which is a free market think tank in London. So worked there for 2 years and then moved to the Institute of Economic Affairs, a sister think tank, the oldest free market think tank in the UK. And despite my visa still being the bane of my existence, it has panned out. And I've come to feel very at home in London. And it has been interesting having an American accent, an American voice, and weighing in on some of these domestic issues. And it's been a challenge, but I hope it's made me work harder and hopefully be better at it.
You've got great conviction. You come across really well when you're on TV, which is a large part of your job right now, because you're trying to communicate messages. Where does that come from? How are you able to be so eloquent? Is it just a natural ability?
Max, you are far, far too kind. I don't necessarily see myself that way. It's very nice to hear that you do, but I pick up on all my little mistakes, all my stumbles, when I trip over my speech. And when I have had a moment where I think I have been really eloquent or that went really well, that stands out in my mind. But it doesn't happen all that often. I'm definitely still at the point where I think, oh, I really nailed that one. I mean, when I look at my overall contribution, I think, wow, got to edit that, got to work there. So thank you for saying that. I don't think I'm bad, but when I do get it right, that still feels really good.
Do you not think it comes from you knowing what you think, you knowing what you're about, you knowing what your argument is, and this conviction, you have this great belief in your politics?
Yeah, that definitely helps. I think because I am a very committed classical liberal and I have a philosophy about the world, free markets, free people, and a free economy, if I don't know something for certain or if I'm not as clued up in an area, my instinct will be that of a classical liberal and I'll move in that direction. But I'm always very careful. I think it's I think it's great and necessary to have a philosophy. I think it does make you a better communicator. I think it makes people resonate with you more because they trust that you believe something and you're not just saying it. But I'm always very careful to make sure that if I really don't know my facts or really don't feel like an expert in the area, that I stop at opinion and don't end up going into policy prescriptions, because I think that is a bit more dangerous.
Why do you think people listen to you?
Well, gosh, if they are listening to me, I hope it's because I really try to ground things in facts. Because we are living in an age where you can come up with a statistic for everything. We're living in an age where we don't value experts like we used to. And I think if you can present people with some simple facts, and then also add on top of it this classically liberal philosophy that, there's good news to tell about the world. We're getting richer. We're living longer. We're becoming more prosperous. When you allow individuals to interact with each other, it leads to good things. That you don't need the state to tell you what you can eat and how you have to dress and who you have to marry. That, we as individuals can make the best choices for ourselves and our families. I do think people resonate with that. I think it's innate to it's our human spirit to want to be individual in that way.
So credibility is very important to you, but also, you want people to trust what you're saying. You don't want to go beyond what you know.
Oh, absolutely. That's really important. And that can be difficult, especially in a 2 or 3 minute debate or something. You're coming up with your facts, you're having a hard line. You're definitely putting forward an agenda. That's true. But you always just need to take into account, you need to know yourself. What's my philosophy? What's my opinion? And what are the facts? And I think if you know those 3 things, you can make a really cohesive and clear argument.
What is success? Do you regard yourself as successful? Because I would, but I know people have different judgments of themselves.
I don't know what I'm doing next Tuesday, Max, so I have no idea if I'm successful. I think you can define success in two ways. One is the way that the world sees you. And we have to be honest, we have very clear ideas in the world about what success is. It's in terms of what job you have, how much money you make, do you have a family, do you have kids, do you have a dog? Let's be honest, we as the rest of the world look at people and measure success in a very specific way. And I'm 28 years old, and I would imagine that, in some respects anyway, people would regard what I've done so far as successful. But I think the more meaningful way to talk about success is, do you have goals, and are you on your way to achieving them? And by goals, I don't just mean I want to be a brain surgeon or I want to be an anchor on CNN. I mean, do I want to have a job that contributes? Do I want to have a job that's meaningful? Do I want to have a salary that can allow me to live a certain kind of lifestyle? Do I want a partner? Do I want to actually be single for quite some time and see the world? What are the goals? They don't have to be I want to go to Brazil. It can just be I want to be an independent person who travels. I think if you have those goals and you're pursuing them, then you are successful. I think that's what matters most.
A lot of people are fascinated by success, aren't they? But why do you think that is? Because I find that a lot of successful people aren't that satisfied by success, and they sometimes question how they got in the positions that they are.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you?
It does. So when I think about people who I look up to, who I would deem to be extremely successful, there are a few interesting characteristics. One, I would say the really successful people have some level of humility. And by that, I don't mean that they talk themselves down or that they don't think they should be where they are, but that they're very receptive and open-minded to people around them also being successful. And that they take with a pinch of salt that whatever's come at them at life is something that they've been able to handle well, but there are a lot of different factors involved. And I just find those people so enjoyable. And they're usually not that focused on their success. But that's not to say that they're diminishing their success either. It's not, oh, I'm not a big deal, don't look at me. They're just, quite reasonable and practical people who are clearly successful because of those qualities.
Some people have bigger goals than others, don't they? Do you think some people are more driven than others, and that therefore defines their success?
Again, I think we, as in the world, have we weigh up and judge where people should be putting their efforts, and I think we put a lot of pressure on people at different ages. I always joke, because I give talks on things like the gender pay gap and women's rights in 2018 and all that, and I think there's a lot of good news to be said about how well women are doing. But I always joke, at age 22, it's, be single, be free, go live your life, don't get bogged down with a boyfriend. And then at age 25, it's, have you met someone? And then at age 28 or 29, it's like, well, where's the wedding ring? Where are the kids? And that change happens over 7 years, this tiny, tiny period of time. And the expectations we put on other people to move at different paces is just ridiculous. People are driven in different areas. They want different things at different times. And that's fine, which is why I think the most valuable definition of success is what your goals were. When you look back on your life, or when you look back at the past year, did you follow along to the path that you set out for yourself? Because some people will want to be married at age 25, and some people won't. And, we shouldn't have an external pressure about what the right option is.
Do you think, I've got a theory that drive is driven by fear. There's something that you don't want to go back to, which pushes you forward. Do you agree with that?
I can relate to that. I think there may be some element of fear, but also I think there can definitely be a stronger element of boredom. The fear of boredom, let's say.
Yeah, well, I've got that, I think.
The fear that it isn't necessarily that I'll move backwards, but what if I stay where I am? What if this is the only new thing I'll ever experience, the last new thing I'll experience? Yeah, I think a lot of people have that fear of boredom, and it propels them. And these days, it's so much easier to change careers. You see people do all kinds of things over the course of their lifetime. I think, you could look at that in a really negative way and say, oh, well, they never committed. But you could look at it in a positive way and say they went on new adventures.
It's important to overcome hurdles, isn't it? And not to be I think America's much better at dealing with failure than British people, for example. Would you agree with that?
Probably broadly, yeah. I think in the States, if you look at this idea of bankruptcy, for example, particularly in business, not in your personal life, but bankruptcy in business in the States is actually treated very differently than it is in the UK. And this idea that your business went bankrupt, but you're going to try again in the States is much more embraced. Whereas in the UK, I think it's a bit more put your head down in shame, go get a desk job. I would broadly say that, but I think the Brits have a very entrepreneurial spirit as well. I think just that America is, is founded on this idea of the American dream, right? And we're all taught that from a very young age, and that probably does have some influence down
Well, you can be president, but a Brit can't be
right.
the Queen or the monarch.
Right. Well, that's true. Actually, that's a very good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Is there one challenge that you're very grateful to have overcome?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would probably go back to being an American who puts their voice out there in UK media. I find most Twitter abuse quite funny, but I cannot tell you. It's really countless times a day now I get comments about going home. Who do you think you are? Your accent, all this, all that. And so I definitely haven't overcome it in the sense that I would like to think overcoming it is convincing people that those arguments aren't legitimate. That's been a challenge. I mean, every time I speak on UK policy, I know I have to go an extra step, do a bit of extra research, because I didn't have the history lessons at age 7 and 8 that other people had in this country. I don't have the same knowledge base.
But that drives you to a better conversation, presumably, as well.
Well, it drives me to research more and to work harder, and hopefully it leads to a better conversation and more perspective. But it is a challenge. I remember the first time I ever did a media appearance, I took my shoes off underneath the desk just in case I had to run out of the studio. I mean, I was absolutely terrified. Who was I, this little American, to dare comment on alcohol tags?
How did you break through that fear?
I just did it. I mean, I did have my shoes off underneath the desk. I'm not kidding. But I planted myself, and I opened my mouth, and my first answer was not good. And once I overcame that and realized I wasn't going to run off the set, maybe it was just going to be bad, my following answers got better and better. And that was 4 years ago.
That's a classic case of fight or flight, though, isn't it? Your body's telling you, you've got
Run.
a choice here. But that's a real sign of success that you chose to fight. I'm just interested in what you think within you allowed you to do that.
I think I wanted to do it. I think I wanted to talk about alcohol tags at 2:30 p.m. on that day. I think I really wanted to do it. And I remember working at townhall.com over in the States, which is sort of a conservative online news outlet. And I remember looking up to some of the women there who would go on media and come out with these amazing arguments and answers. And I remember thinking, I'd love to have a job where that could be part of it, where I could do something like that. And then a year later, sitting on the set, having the opportunity to do it, I knew I wanted it. I mean, I really wanted to run off the set as well. But I think that goal, right, having that goal, something that I wanted to work towards, not knowing how it would pan out or what it would look like, having that goal and knowing I could achieve it if I just sat on that set and got through it, probably is what got me through it.
That's a great example. And finally, is there one sort of tip you can give to people to find their own success, as you'd probably put it?
I'll go back to my point about experts. I'm not an expert in the area of success, but in Westminster, in the think tank world, in a quite a small bubble, I've spoken to quite a few women, young women actually, who have come to me, not shamefully, but definitely quietly, and said, I'd like to do a bit more media. I'd like to write a bit more. I'd like to get my voice out there, which fills me with such joy because I want to help facilitate that. But you can tell they wouldn't necessarily go speak to other people about this because it would almost seem like a bad thing to say. And the advice I always give them is it really mostly comes down to hard work. Maybe that's a bit of a cliche, but it's the willingness to wake up at 5 a.m. and do, a tiny local radio slot. It's the willingness to stay up overnight, which is something I remember doing, I think it was during the midterms in 2014 to write my first article for a national paper.
I was going to say, it wasn't us, was it?
No, I don't think it was. But I had to stay up overnight because of the time difference to watch a debate or something. Didn't get sleep, wrote the article overnight, but it was the first time I was able to write for a national paper. And making those sacrifices goes a really long way. You have to have the talent, you have to have the research and the knowledge base, you have to have the philosophy, you have to be passionate, but it's the drive. The drive is what will end up getting you, I think, just over that hurdle.
Thank you for speaking to me, Kate.
Thanks for having me, Max.